What is the Bell Theorem you were talking about?
Well, the Bell Theorem is simply an interpretation of an experiment in quantum mechanics which seemed to suggest that information is non-local. In other words, that everything about everywhere can be known here and now, because somehow all information is cotangent to every point in the matrix. I don't pretend to have the background to judge the Bell Theorem. What I would say about it is, if it isn't true, something like it must be true to account for the informational content of these drug experiences. If you just take a simple behaviorist model, what is in your head, if behaviorists and reductionist evolutionists are correct, what is in your head should be very adapted to the here and now. It should be efficacious information that bears on your survival. Instead, what we find when we take these drugs is a density of information, an alienness of information, an inapplicability of information to the human condition that suggests that information is available that has no bearing on the life of the individual or his the success of his evolutionary strategy. And I just cannot believe that these things are built into the human psyche. I have, as I say, I was involved with Jungian ideas, and those archetypes and those archetypal processes are not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the thing which, for want of a better word, we call the alien or the extraterrestrial, the thing which comes out of the drug experience that is unenglishable, beautiful, but so bizarre that it seems to exceed human categories.
Some people talk about entities.
Yes, it can present itself as an entity. It can present itself in a number of different ways. It is the central mystery of our age. We are so alienated, or let me restart that. The relationship of intellectuals alive today who are familiar with the state of modern science and that sort of thing to a question like the existence of extraterrestrials is approximately in the same place or degree of closure as the relationship of 15th and 16th century intellectuals to the real properties of matter. In other words, they had only a tenuous grip on the real properties of matter, and consequently alchemy could exist, could project the hopes of human psychic transformation onto inert matter, because so little was known about the real nature of matter that it seemed a reasonable place to expect these kinds of things to happen. The present state of thought today is that it's highly likely that there are extraterrestrials somewhere out among the stars. The state of the development of our chemistry, astrophysics, linguistics, etc., makes it reasonable for us as moderns to expect that. So then consequently we go into our heads and there seems to be the extraterrestrial. It may be a true extraterrestrial, but it is odd that it has hidden itself in the place where we expected to find it. And this causes me to assume that actually it's something far more profound than an extraterrestrial. It's something which, to gain our confidence, is disguised as an extraterrestrial because its real nature is so much more devastating than that is the way in which it insinuates itself into our lives so that we can dream of a hegemony of organized intelligence out in the galaxy that we will relate to and be assimilated into. What I think is going on is that actually the most intelligent life form on the planet is not man and his institutions. It is the overmind of the human species, which is a diffuse organism of technical artifacts like computers and information transfer and retrieval systems, and human beings. But human institutions are like myths woven by the individual human cells that make up society. The real controlling modality on the planet is never visible, and it is this group mind, and it controls the release of ideas into history by designating certain people as geniuses, and if there's a certain kind of imbalance, a certain kind of religion will arise to collapse that imbalance. If technical advancement is outstripping the evolution of ethics, a religion can step in to freeze these developments so that one can catch up with the other. And I think the whole consciousness movement and that has evolved over the past 20 years is an attempt to map, to verify, and to open a dialogue with this thing, which is the other. We call it the other, we call it the alien, but it is actually the overmind of the species. And it seeks this dialogue. It has been waiting all these millennia for us to essentially come to a point of intellectual maturity where we did not then require messiahs, religions, and these various crude interventions into the human experience which keep us from destroying ourselves.
This is also what Jung called the collective unconscious.
Right, but he painted it as a very passive kind of thing, more like a data bank or a place where all myths and all memories were. I think of it as a god, a kind of God, and I think it is active in three-dimensional space. It can be active in something as personalistic and circumscribed as a string of coincidences which you experience, which seem to be turning your life in a certain direction that you may not have expected. Or it can be active in something like the worldwide phenomenon of flying saucers. Flying saucers are nothing more than miracles, and they occur essentially to bedevil science, because science is a human institution that has arisen in the last 500 years that dreams of displacing the overmind without ever realizing that it exists. Science dreams of this place of preeminence, but science creates alienation, species survival problems, all of these things. Now then, the overmind, which can be thought of simply like a cultural thermostat, it clicks on when the clash of contradiction between the ethics of a society and some other institution, in this case science, becomes too great. This governing device clicks on, and it begins producing those events most destructive to the institution that is seeking preeminence, in this case science. So the inexplicability of the flying saucer phenomenon is its central reason for being. And all the effort to reduce it to something, metal ships from far away or anything else, is doomed to failure, because its very reason for being is to undermine those kind of ontological systems. Why we're talking about this is because psilocybin inducts you into the flying saucer experience. In other words, a metaphor for it would be to say that psilocybin is a means of triggering the so-called abduction experience, or the close encounter of a third kind. Once you realize that, once you've satisfied yourself that that's true, a number of experimental avenues are opened up. A number of different approaches to what's going on are suggested. I mean, here we have alien entities eager to transmit information, eager to carry on a noetic dialogue, and we seem to be ignoring the opportunity because our categories mitigate against us correctly appreciating it.
Are these entities coming from outer space, or are they more part of us?
It's impossible to tell. This is the game that you must play with them, is through dialogue, trying to figure out if this is the previously unseen human psyche, or whether it is actually a thing coming from the outside. And it is not an easy thing to decide, because we are so alienated from the self that we don't really know what it would be.
So it's not important to know the context, it's more important to know the content. What they have
The content is very interesting, yes, because even if we were somehow to verify that Bell's non-locality theorem applied and that these were real entities around a real sun somewhere in the universe, it would make them no more or less real. In other words, it's a hang-up to demand that they appear in three-dimensional space. I always, I have this hang-up, so I don't put it down. I always think of the Apostle Thomas, because you'll recall Thomas was not present when Christ returned when he rose from the grave. He appeared to the apostles in the upper room, and Thomas was not present. Then later he was there, and the apostles said, "Listen, the Master was here, and it was wonderful." And he said, "You people have been smoking too many little brown cigarettes. That's preposterous." And at that point, Christ walked in, and he said, "Thomas, come put your hand into the wound so that you'll believe." And so he did, and so then he believed. Well, the moral of the story, as I read it, is Thomas was the doubter. Consequently, Thomas was the only one who was allowed to actually touch the resurrection body. It was because he doubted that he was vouchsafed this position of preeminence. And I'm like that. I mean, I would like to touch the incorporeal body. I would like to call the saucer down and observe all of its workings. But this is a spiritual aspiration that cannot be advanced by any human technique or activity. This is just something you pray for. In the meantime, the job is to map it and describe it and explore it and try to direct the attention of other people more intelligent than myself to this astonishing fact, really. I mean, I'm troubled by the fact that so many strange claims are made today, so many forms of aliens and channeling and voices in the head, that when I began all this 10 years ago, I was afraid to speak because I sounded mad, even to myself, and I sounded like a voice in the wilderness. Today, the situation has changed to the point where I can barely make myself heard amidst the clamor of people who have various entities from Atlantis and beyond the grave and Zeta Reticuli and what have you, clamoring to be heard.